Welcome to the Kaiser Report. I'm Max Kaiser. What's the matter with Kansas and Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, Massachusetts, Virginia, Nevada, Kentucky, almost all of America? What's the matter with America? Stacey?
Well, it has certainly been a joy watching the world melt down about Trump and the votes for Donald Trump. And there's an escalating sort of situation at his rallies, riots you might call them, in Chicago, which of course harkens back to 1968 when the Democratic Convention was held in Chicago and there were massive riots that lasted for 4 days. But What's the Matter with Kansas, of course, was written by Thomas Frank, and he has a great piece out in The Guardian called Millions of Ordinary Americans Support Donald Trump. Here's why. When he isn't spewing insults, the Republican frontrunner is hammering home a powerful message about free trade and its victims. So he notes that over and over again in the mainstream media in America, all they talk about is the racist quotes and the things like the wall to keep Mexicans out. But he watched hours and hours of actual Donald Trump footage to see what he's talking about. And he found out that you need to question more because the mainstream media is not telling you the full story. So he says stories marveling at the stupidity of Trump voters are published nearly every day. Articles that accuse Trump's followers of being bigots have appeared by the hundreds, if not the thousands. Conservatives have written them, liberals have written them, impartial professionals have written them. The headline of a recent Huffington Post column announced bluntly that Trump won Super Tuesday because America is racist. A New York Times reporter proved that Trump followers were bigots by coordinating a map of Trump's support with a map of racist Google searches. Everyone knows it. And yet he looked at those hours and hours of footage, and what he found is that it seems that Donald Trump is obsessed with free trade. He actually almost exclusively talks about free trade in his speeches. But he said he was surprised to see this because he had not seen free trade mentioned once in the thousands of articles written about Trump and his stupid supporters. He said it seems to obsess him, the destructive free trade deals our leaders have made, the many companies that have moved their production facilities to other lands, the phone calls he will make to those companies, CEOs in order to threaten them with steep tariffs unless they move back to the U.S.
Well, it makes me think of the whole Black Lives Matter campaign because the prison-industrial complex in America is reintroducing slavery by rounding up young black men, putting them into prison, and forcing them to work for slave wages. That's racism to me. I mean, there's nothing more racist than slavery. And America has made slavery legal again by making it legal to have prison populations work for corporations for pennies an hour. That's slavery. It's neo-slavery. So what could be more anti-racist than talking about trade, which is about jobs? Okay, America needs jobs. The unemployment rate amongst young black men in America is some astronomically high number, and trade is how you get jobs, and trade is what he's talking about.
So it's an issue, he points out, trade, that polarizes Americans by socioeconomic status. To the professional class, which encompasses the vast majority of our media figures, economists, Washington officials, and Democratic power brokers, what they call free trade is something so obviously good and noble, it doesn't require explanation or inquiry, even thought. Republican and Democratic leaders alike agree on this, and no amount of facts can move them from their Econ 101 dreams. And yet, he points to that moment of Carrier air conditioners made in Indiana. And they announced to their workers that despite all of the subsidies they were receiving from Indiana and all of the promises they gave to Indiana in order to receive those tax subsidies, that they would stay there, they've decided to move to Monterrey, Mexico. So here are these guys. It was a shocking moment. These guys are told that they're losing their jobs and just calm down. Just stop swearing at the CEO telling you this, that this is just globalization, move on with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a product of NAFTA. NAFTA, as Trump points out, was a horribly crafted deal. All the trade deals, so-called free trade deals, are horribly crafted in that they benefit the oligarchs and they disenfranchise and gut workers. And of course, you end up with a lot of people unemployed, and most of those unemployed folks are blacks in America, and that's a form of racism. So
Well, actually,
Trump is the opposite of a racist.
Yeah, in that video of the carrier workers being fired, there are white people, there are men, there are women, there are black people, there are Latino people. It's a mixed group of people all losing their well-paid jobs, and they're told to just go get on with it. Globalization means they have to go work at McDonald's. But they said, Thomas Frank referring to that, he actually also mentions NAFTA. He says, well, here is a video of a company moving its job to Mexico, courtesy of NAFTA. This is what it looks like. The carrier executive talks in that familiar and highly professional HR language about the need to stay competitive in the extremely price-sensitive marketplace. A worker shouts you at the executive. The executive asks people to please be quiet so he can share his information about all of them losing their jobs. So this is this is, as Thomas Frank points out, he said, could it be that all of this trade stuff is a key to understanding the Trump phenomenon, not the racist and the bigot stuff? Because that's what our mainstream media is focusing on. That's what those in the Beltway media, they live well in a creative class economy. But what about all those millions of people who've lost their jobs?
I'll make the comparison of Trump to FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who came in after the crash of the Wall Street in the 20s and then the beginning of the Depression. Now, we've had a crash in the world economy in 2008 and the beginning of a global depression, including large pieces of America where the participation and the employment numbers are at all-time lows, and all kinds of metrics, and no matter how you slice and dice it, looks like a depression, food stamps, et cetera. So here you have Trump not talking about a New Deal, as you had with FDR, but talking about cutting a good deal. That's what he wants to do. He wants to recut these deals. It's a globalized world. So FDR had to redo deals within the United States and re-enfranchise working class and to slim down Wall Street to make it so it wasn't a predatory monster. But we live in a globalized economy. Trump is a global businessman. He needs to create a new deal or a fair deal or new deals around the world as a global FDR. And I think he's the new FDR to give this new generation some hope.
Well, it's not to discount the fact that he does say racist stuff. He does say many racist things. So that is a fact.
So did FDR. So does every American president.
Yeah. Okay, but it's horrible and it's bad and it's wrong. But the fact is, what Thomas Frank is looking at is people can mock them and call these people disgraceful, the voters that vote for him. But the fact is, we have a situation like we've mentioned this before. John Maynard Keynes in 1919 in the Versailles Treaty, he stepped away from it. He was part of the group that were negotiating the peace treaty with Germany. And he left because he said, you do not understand what you will reap what you sow. And what you are sowing is the reparations on Germany are so egregious, so onerous, so horrible that one day you will look back at what the horrors you will create. He saw what would happen in causing the Great Depression. So there were warnings during NAFTA when NAFTA deals were being signed. President Obama right now is about to fast track through TPP and TTIP, all these other trade deals, which are even worse than NAFTA. And many activists, many likes of John Maynard Keynes of our day are warning that this is the consequence. People 30 years ago warned Clinton, or 25 years ago warned Clinton, that this sort of situation would emerge. And in terms of if it's economics or racism, so the AFL-CIO did a poll of their actual people in Pittsburgh and Cleveland, Ohio, two deindustrialized areas. And Thomas Frank says of this thing, there is another way to interpret the Trump phenomenon. A map of his support may coordinate with racist Google searches, but it coordinates even better with deindustrialization and despair, with the zones of economic misery that 30 years of Washington's free market consensus have brought the rest of America. So the AFL-CIO poll found why a lot of the people who are actually even registered Democrats would vote Trump. And the reason given, number one, was not immigration. In fact, number one was good jobs and the economy. So this was, again, looking back to Clinton, who signed NAFTA. Remember, he ran on It's the Economy, Stupid platform.
Look, America, unique country in that it was founded on the principle that the government serves the people, not the other way around. And America's at risk of losing that to global corporations. And through theocracy in America and through the vilification of women in America, leading to the loss of rights that women have had for decades in America. Why is the abortion issue so huge in America amongst these, generally speaking, right-wing corporate conglomerates? Because they need the slaves. They need more slave labor. They need more prisoners.
But let's look at how the mainstream media, this is an issue that has come up with your interview with Das, and it's also an issue that's coming up here with Thomas Frank, looking at the Trump phenomena. Because the mainstream media, again, it lives in Washington, D.C., property prices are soaring. It's the highest income zone in America because they're people who are receiving the contracts from the government and live there. Here are just two tweets I want to show you from mainstream media sort of figures from the progressive sort of side. And here how the mainstream media can't see beyond their creative class sort of hatred for the deindustrialized zones. So here's Matt Iglesias right before Michigan, the Michigan primary, which Bernie Sanders won. He beat Hillary Clinton. So here he is a week before that. Where did the Sanders campaign get this idea that they can win Michigan? He was mocking the people that thought that Bernie Sanders has a chance against a neoliberal, free trade loving, sign any deal kind of gal like Hillary. This is from September of 2015, before all the primaries started, and this is from Ross Douthat in the New York Times. And he was looking at all these people warning against Trump at the time and just ridiculing the notion that anybody in America could be, think differently than a guy living in New York City or DC would think. The entire commentariat is going to feel a little silly when Marco Rubio wins every Republican primary. So this is why you need alternative media, people outside the Beltway, people that actually, by the way, in America, you no longer have local media. This is a new thing as well. Why you're getting such a split between what the mainstream media tells you and what we see constantly erupting on the street.
Oh, is this why RT now has 70 million viewers a week and 35 million a day? According to a recent poll by an established pollster? I guess so.
Question more. Question more.
Well, we got to go.
Question more.
All right. I'm going to be questioning more in the second half, so stay tuned.